She used the master key, Dad. She's in the house. That was my son's voice, thin, shaking on the other end of the line. I was still 6 miles away, parked at an inspection site, but I saw it all through the security feed. Beverly Shale, president of our HOA, halfway into my living room with her clipboard, scanning my framed pictures like she owned the place. That's how Karen used her master key. On my door, my son caught her. Red-handed deputies dragged her out. Screaming really began. She said it was some kind of safety check, Aiden whispered. But she didn't even knock. She just opened it. She used the HOA's skeleton key without warning, without notice, and without cause. And my 13-year-old son was standing in the hallway frozen, watching a stranger in authority walk through our home like it was hers. What Beverly didn't know was that the smart lock wasn't just for show. It was designed, customized, and calibrated by me. The override she used, logged. Her entry, time-stamped. Her violation, already recorded to cloud storage with a geolock signature. And what she really didn't know was that she just walked into the one house on the street she shouldn't have crossed. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. My name is Marcus Talbot, Fire Code Inspector, licensed in 3 counties. My day job? Writing the very enforcement codes Beverly pretends to wield. And that smart lock she just bypassed? I wrote the back end myself after a neighbor's daughter had a panic attack during a false alarm break-in last spring. That door is more than just a barrier, it's peace of mind. Because in our house, that lock protects more than a property line. It guards the last piece of legacy I have left. After my wife passed, it's just been me and Aiden. My shifts keep me on the road most days. That's why the house is rigged with a multi-node surveillance loop and 3 hidden backups. It's not paranoia, it's promise. The brass fireman's plaque next to our door belonged to my father killed, pulling a child out of a burning duplex when I was 17. Every bolt I drive, every sensor I place, is a quiet tribute to the man who taught me that safety isn't a policy, it's a responsibility. So when Beverly let herself in, when she used that key on our door while my son stood there helpless, she didn't just violate policy, she desecrated something personal. I got home in just under 8 minutes. When I pulled up, she was already backing off the porch, clipboard in hand, fake concern plastered across her face. "Marcus," she said like we were friends. "There's been some concerning reports of irregular security setups. I had to check. You didn't announce yourself. It was a wellness check," she said sweetly. "No, it wasn't. You never logged entry. You used a manual override on a digitally secured property with a minor inside. That's not just unethical, it's illegal." She blinked. Flinched, maybe, but only for a second. "There's no need to escalate this. I'm just doing my job." That's when Aiden stepped out onto the porch, phone still recording. Beverly's smile wavered. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just pointed at the camera. "The feed's already backed up. You crossed a line." Inside, Aiden looked up at me. "Was I supposed to do something?" "No," I said. "You did everything right." That night, I opened a case log and titled it the same thing you just read. Unauthorized entry, Beverly Shale. Footage attached, logs downloaded, legal contacts highlighted. She thinks this is over, but she doesn't understand what it means when a father's line gets crossed. "Where are you watching from?" By morning, the security footage had already made the rounds. I hadn't posted it publicly yet, but I'd sent it to 3 neighbors I trusted. One of them, Carla, forwarded it to her husband, who was already on the community message board before sunrise. That's how these things start in neighborhoods like Briar Glen, not with protest signs or angry mobs, with whispers, with quiet inboxes that start to fill. And just like that, Beverly's control started to slip. It wasn't the first time she'd crossed the line, I knew that much. But up until now, no one had proof. People talk about inspections that happen while they're away, fines that show up out of nowhere, rules that don't exist in the bylaws, but without documentation, it's all chalked up to neighborly paranoia. This time, though, there were timestamps, logs, audio, Aiden's voice asking her to leave. Her reply, "This isn't your concern, young man. I'd seen this pattern before. They count on silence, on fatigue, on the idea that no one wants to be the one who starts a war with the HOA. But I wasn't starting anything. I was finishing what she triggered. Later that afternoon, while inspecting a warehouse fire panel downtown, I got a text from my neighbor George. She fined me $150 for faded mailbox numbers. Never happened before. Think it's connected? By 3 p.m., I had a dozen similar messages, same format. Small fines, obscure citations, all tied to the previous 2 weeks. Anyone who'd spoken up at the last meeting, or even muttered dissent during a walk, was now suddenly non-compliant. Beverly had been laying the groundwork for months. Conditioning people to think resistance meant punishment. That silence bought peace, but fear makes people sloppy. And Beverly, she was getting reckless. That evening, I walked the loop around the retention pond near the back of the neighborhood. It's where folks go when they want to speak without cameras. That's where I found Carla and Sam, both leaning against the rail. She's done this before, Carla said. She called it a safety walkthrough. Said she had to make sure our guest house door latched properly. My daughter was in the shower. Sam nodded, arms folded. She's been trying to get my dog labeled a nuisance animal, claims he barks aggressively every time she walks by. He glanced toward the trees. She walks by at 5:30 a.m. with a metal pole. We stood there for a long moment, breeze flicking the surface of the water, the distant hum of an AC unit kicking on. She used to be a substitute teacher, Carla added. That's how she got started on the board. Said she wanted to make sure the neighborhood was safe for families. Now she had the only master key besides the maintenance tech. And unlike him, she didn't log her entries. I looked at the clubhouse from across the pond. Big glass windows, brick facade, HOA meetings every third Thursday. Controlled, airless, tight. Beverly ran them like a courtroom. Comments limited, counterpoints dismissed, but cracks were forming, the fines were growing more ridiculous. A solar panel that reflected too brightly. A flag that was improperly mounted. Lawn chairs visible from common pathways. It was all pressure, a slow grind. Enough to make a homeowner question themselves. Make them doubt. I wasn't doubting anymore. I was cataloging. Back at home, I updated the log. Rewatched the footage this time as a fire inspector, not just a father. I slowed the moment she stepped inside, paused at the frame that showed her reaching for the mantle. She didn't glance toward the smoke detector, didn't check the carbon monoxide reader. She wasn't inspecting anything. She was searching. For what? I didn't know yet, but intent matters. Especially when you're trying to prove a violation of authority. When I closed my laptop, Aiden was standing at the hallway corner, watching me. "Are you going to tell the police?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "But I'm going to tell someone who can make her regret it." His shoulders dropped slightly. Then he nodded. "Good." That night, I got an email. A name I didn't expect to see. Elijah Mercer, HOA Vice President. Subject line, "We should talk." Elijah Mercer didn't knock. He stood outside the next morning, arms folded, shirt tucked a little too neatly into his slacks. HOA-issued badge clipped to his belt, like he thought it made him invisible. I opened the door, said nothing. "I'm not here on official business," he started, eyes flicking toward the street. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside. He hesitated, then walked in. Inside, he kept his hands to himself. No clipboard, no inspection sheet. Just that twitchy stillness of a man already regretting the decision to show up. He sat down stiffly at the kitchen bar, didn't touch the stool. His eyes drifted to the hallway, the one Beverly had stood in, then back to me. "She didn't tell the board about it," he said finally. I waited. "I mean the entry, your place. I found out through Carla." He rubbed the side of his jaw like something itched deep beneath his skin. "And I saw the clip, the one your son recorded." I crossed my arms. "You're the vice president. You mean to tell me you didn't know she was doing this?" Elijah winced. Not from the words, but from the truth inside them. I knew she had the key. I didn't know she'd been using it like that. "Then what did you think she was using it for?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His fingers tapped once against the marble, then again. He stared at the fireman's plaque mounted above the hallway. I was told it was only for emergencies, like if a sprinkler line burst, or someone wasn't responding. His voice trailed off. "But then last month she let herself into Noelle's place. Said there was a gas smell. Turned out she just didn't like the garden gnome." He looked up, his face drawn. "She's not." "Well, Marcus. Or maybe she is, and that's worse." I studied him carefully. He wasn't here to confess everything. He was testing the water, poking at the fence to see if it'd bite, but his body was already giving him away. He kept shifting his weight, kept his elbows in, wouldn't meet my eyes for more than a few seconds at a time. Guilt was a loud thing when you knew how to listen. She has a binder, he added. Keeps notes on certain houses, photos, little red tabs. I saw mine in there once, yours too. I didn't respond. I think she was looking for something when she came into your place, he continued. Something she thought you had. She was looking at the mantle, I said. Didn't even glance at the CO detectors. Elijah nodded once, almost like he didn't want to admit agreement. There's going to be a motion filed this week. A proposal to amend the bylaws, give the HOA full authority for interior visual inspections under Section 8. Section 8 doesn't cover interior access. It will if no one objects. There it was. The real reason he'd come. She's pushing for permanent access privileges, I said, framed as safety. He blinked slowly. But it's surveillance. She wants to codify it. I stood, walked to the front door, and opened it without a word. Elijah took the hint. At the threshold, he turned. I'm not your enemy, Marcus, but you should know. She's already looking into getting you disqualified from future board votes. Claims your lock setup creates a security loophole for the neighborhood. I raised an eyebrow. Because I made it tamper-proof? He didn't reply. She's scared, I said. She knows I have the logs. The footage. The proof. She doesn't scare easy, he muttered. She will. He nodded again, slowly, eyes flicking to the brass plaque before stepping outside. Just before he reached the sidewalk, I called out. You said she had a binder. He paused. Yeah. Can you get me a photo of it? His jaw clenched. The hesitation sat heavy in the air. Finally, he gave the smallest nod. I'll try. And then he was gone. 2 days later, the violation notice arrived. This one was printed on thicker paper, glossy and double-sided. Beverly was escalating not just in tone, but in optics. Immediate action required was stamped across the top in bold red, right above a list of alleged infractions. Non-standard door lock design. Unauthorized modifications to shared security features. Failure to comply with HOA uniformity clause. Article 7, line 4, B. At the bottom, a fine, $275, due in 5 business days. It was laughable, except it wasn't. Aiden found it stuffed in the front door frame when he got home from school. No envelope, no signature. Just a notice shoved between wood and weather strip like a threat with a font. I held the paper under the kitchen light and reread it 3 times. It was flimsy as hell. Article 7 didn't even have a line 4B. But Beverly wasn't trying to win legally. She was trying to bury me in paperwork, force me to either cave or snap. And based on the messages I was getting from neighbors, she wasn't stopping with me. Carla got hit with a noise complaint for wind chimes. Sam received a demand to remove his porch lights because the bulbs were too cold in tone. George was ordered to repaint his mailbox again. Beverly had activated her punishment phase. And this time, it was systematic. I walked over to the clubhouse that evening, not for a meeting, just to observe. It was the one night each week the board left the door unlocked for open forum hours, but no one ever showed up anymore. Too many residents had tried, too many left embarrassed, but I needed to see who was still loyal, who was still watching. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I stepped in. There were 2 board members at the long table, Marcia and Dana, both mid-50s, both always nodding, just slightly slower than Beverly. They looked up when I entered, surprise flashing across their faces. Just here to ask a quick question, I said. About the violation notice. Marcia reached for a folder. Dana looked at the ceiling like she wanted to disappear into it. The smart lock, I continued. Was this based on a recent policy change? We've had several complaints, Marcia said carefully. The board voted to move toward hardware consistency. It's a safety matter. Safety? I asked. Or visibility? Neither answered. I stepped forward and pulled a folded paper from my jacket pocket. It was the HOA's own community compliance manual, the one they send with welcome packets. I flipped it open, highlighted section already marked. This is Article 7, I said. No line 4B exists. You sent out a fine with a fabricated clause. That's not a violation, it's harassment. Dana's lips parted like she wanted to object, but nothing came out. I dropped the manual on the table. The slap echoed. There are people in this neighborhood with real problems. Broken irrigation lines, mold in shared utility sheds. But Beverly's targeting porch lights and wind chimes? I leaned in. And now she wants interior inspection rights? Marcia shifted in her seat. Those motions haven't been finalized. Then tell her this, I said. Every fake citation she pushes from now on, every overreach is being logged. And if she wants to call it safety, I'll let the State Board of Regulatory Affairs decide whether that includes unauthorized entry into an occupied home. I turned and walked out without waiting for a response. Outside, the sky was just starting to darken. Porch lights were flickering on across the cul-de-sacs. One of them, Sam's, now glowed amber instead of white. I wondered if he'd changed it, or if Beverly had done it herself. Back home, Aiden was on the couch, headphones on, watching a video. He looked up as I came in. Did they say anything? He asked. No, I said, but they listened. I sat down and opened my laptop. I logged the fake clause, attached a PDF scan of the notice, and time-stamped the visit to the clubhouse. I cross-referenced Article 7 again, no line 4B in sight. Beverly wanted a war of attrition, but she didn't realize I'd already turned it into a record of violations. One I was getting ready to submit. By the time Saturday rolled around, Beverly had issued 3 more violation notices. None of them made any legal sense. One was for an unsecured trash lid, even though our bins were latched with city-issued clips. Another claimed our lawn's edge extended 2 inches onto shared sidewalk space. The third? A warning that my exterior camera placement was causing unease. She was throwing darts in the dark, hoping one would stick, but the more she pressed, the more she exposed herself. That afternoon, while Aiden was at his friend's place, I sat down with every HOA document I'd archived over the past 6 years, meeting notes, bylaw amendments, digital logs from the community portal, even cached snapshots of the HOA's now scrubbed access guidelines page. What I found wasn't buried or hidden. It was simply something no one had thought to look for. Beverly had been using the HOA-issued master key under a pretense of emergency access. But according to the bylaws on file with the county clerk's office, any use of physical override keys had to be logged and disclosed in monthly board reports. More importantly, key use required 2 signatures, one from the board president and one from an observing witness. She had neither. I cross-checked the last 18 months of meeting minutes. Not a single mention of master key access, no logs, no reports, no witness signatures. And that wasn't just an internal error, that was a direct violation of Florida's Homeowners Association, Regulation Code Section 7203035, which states that all physical entry by association representatives must be documented, justified, and disclosed to the homeowner within 72 hours. She hadn't done that, not for me, not for Carla, not for Sam, not for anyone. And I had the screenshots to prove it. The coordinator's tone shifted halfway through my summary. This might fall under 720.305. That's enforcement abuse. She gave me a complaint packet, email submission allowed. She encouraged video evidence, time-stamped entries, any HOA materials related to override procedures. I already had it all. And that's when the final piece clicked. I went back into my smart lock dashboard, the back end I'd configured months earlier. Every time a master override was used, the lock generated a silent notification ping, tied to an encrypted log only accessible through the admin interface. Most people wouldn't even know it existed, but I did, and the data was chilling. In the past 4 months, the override key had been used 9 times across 5 separate addresses, all within walking distance of Beverly's lot, and all without any formal notice, complaint, or emergency justification. She wasn't checking homes, she was stalking them. I printed the logs, date, time, duration of entry, even the device signature from the HOA's issued override tool. I overlaid them on a map of the neighborhood. The pattern was unmistakable, clustered, and repeated. She was circling certain homes, over and over. That evening, I emailed the full packet to the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. Then I backed it up twice, one in the cloud, one on a flash drive hidden in a fireproof safe. I didn't tell Aiden everything, just enough. She's not supposed to have that kind of access, I said. And the people who are supposed to watch her aren't. He nodded slowly. So what happens now? Now, I said. I put it in the hands of someone who can shut her down for good. The next morning, I had a new message waiting. Not from the state, from Elijah. Meet me near the maintenance shed, no cameras there. Noon. The maintenance shed sat at the edge of Briar Glen, tucked behind a chain-link fence laced with bougainvillea thorns and HOA-issued no trespassing signs. It was the one place Beverly hadn't outfitted with cameras, too far from the front gate, too unsightly to promote in the community brochure, and that made it perfect. Elijah was already there when I arrived. He wore sunglasses and a plain navy jacket, standing stiff near the wall like someone rehearsing his own guilt. He didn't greet me, just handed over a small envelope. Inside were 4 color-printed photographs. Each showed the same black binder, open across different tables: the community center boardroom, Beverly's patio table, and once disturbingly, on the hood of a car parked outside the Talbot house. My house. She calls it her audit log, Elijah muttered, but it's not official. No one else has access. She won't let us photograph the pages directly, so I did this when she stepped away for a call. I flipped through the images, tabs marked with red dots, each section labeled by address. My name was highlighted in yellow. So was Sam's, Carla's, even George, the quiet vet who never spoke at meetings. She's targeting specific people, I said. She always has, Elijah replied, rubbing the back of his neck. You just finally made it obvious. He glanced down the path toward the clubhouse. I think she's trying to force a precedent. Make the inspections permanent. And not just for hardware. I heard her mention storage checks, inside garages, even fridge contents for community hygiene alignment. She's pushing a new narrative, interior compliance. Insanity, I said. She's framing it as safety, emergency preparedness, wants the board to pre-approve unscheduled entries for households marked as non-compliant, which she defines, I added. He nodded. I held the photos tighter. Do you have anything else? Elijah hesitated. I found the key sign-out logs from the HOA's central drawer. They're supposed to match entries with dates. Hers don't. Half of them are missing signatures. Others are just backdated blanks. I think she's been covering her tracks with fake forms. Can you get me copies? I already did. He reached into his jacket and handed over a folded sheet. Clean, formatted, dated with times she hadn't even been in the neighborhood. You understand what this is? I asked. A felony, he said quietly. Entry under false record keeping. Maybe even impersonation of authority. I stared at him. Why are you helping me now? His shoulders sagged. Because I voted her in, because I stayed silent too long, and because I saw your kid's face in that clip. He looked like my nephew, scared, small. I didn't say thank you. I didn't have to. Instead, I walked over to the shed door and took out my phone. Opened the back end of the lock log. I added the new entry manually. Shed meeting with Elijah Mercer, time-stamped, photographs received, evidence cataloged. This was no longer a neighborhood dispute. This was a pattern of criminal misuse. Elijah leaned against the wall, eyes scanning the horizon. What are you going to do with all this? Submit it, I said. First to the state. Then, depending on how loud she gets, maybe the sheriff. She'll retaliate, he warned. She already did. He nodded. Then I guess we're past warnings. We parted ways without another word. Back home, I scanned the binder photos and the forged logs. I added them to the complaint file. 23 exhibits and counting. Then I printed one copy and sealed it in an envelope addressed to the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. It was time. I walked it to the mailbox myself. And just before I dropped it in, I looked at the fireman's plaque again, warm under the porch light. Brass edges dulled by weather and time. You always told me not to wait for someone else to act, I said quietly. So I won't. The envelope slid in with a solid thud. Across the street, a porch light flicked on. Beverly's? The knock came before noon. 3 short taps, deliberate. When I opened the door, Elijah didn't step in. He stood there with his hands deep in his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched like he was still deciding whether showing up had been a mistake. She knows, he said. I didn't need to ask what he meant. She saw the shed camera feed from one of the grounds crew. Guess someone's been installing their own devices. He looked up, eyes rimmed red. She confronted me last night, asked why I was sneaking around, said I was risking board liability. He stepped inside only when I moved aside. She's unraveling, he continued. I think your report set something off. She's scared, and that makes her dangerous. I led him to the kitchen. Aiden was still upstairs, headphones on, safe from this part of the war. Elijah dropped a manila folder on the counter. It was thick, full, labeled in Beverly's handwriting. "You got into the binder?" I asked. "Copied the whole thing this morning while she was at a neighborhood beautification tour," he exhaled. "Marcus, she's been inside more homes than you think, and not just entryways, closets, bedrooms. I saw a photo of a prescription bottle, another of a financial document pinned to a fridge. I opened the folder and flipped through the images. Names, addresses, notes scribbled like journal entries. Marcus T., obstructionist, son home often, possible retaliation risk. She's compiling profiles," I said, voice low. "She calls them predictive risk assessments," Elijah replied. "She thinks she's creating some kind of homeowner behavioral index. Like she's preemptively deciding who's a threat to the neighborhood order." I sat down, one hand gripping the edge of the counter. This isn't just a power trip. This is a surveillance operation. Elijah reached into his coat and pulled out one final page. This was in the bottom of the file cabinet. It's her proposal for next month's board vote already printed. I scanned it. It was worse than I expected. Motion to establish provisional access rights for high-risk properties. Language so vague it could be used on anyone. Terms like visual irregularities, emotional instability, and non-compliant behavioral tone. It read like a dictator's field manual. "Where are the rest of the board members in all this?" I asked. "Dana's scared. Marcia's riding the status quo. The others are checked out or complicit. And you?" "I'm done playing neutral," he said. "This isn't governance. It's surveillance by pathology." I tucked the motion into the folder and closed it. She built this assuming no one would stop her. "It's time to prove her wrong." Elijah nodded. "I'll speak at the next meeting. I'll verify the logs. I'll testify if it goes to legal. Just make sure your kid stays safe. She's not above using fear as leverage." I watched him leave from the porch. He didn't look back. Inside, I moved the binder evidence to the safe, printed a backup, uploaded a secondary copy to a hidden drive in the cloud. I knew what I had to do next. I called the state office, requested a formal investigator for on-site HOA misconduct, attached everything, every log, every altered entry, every photo Elijah had risked himself to get. By sunset, I had a response. They were forwarding my complaint to the legal enforcement branch. A case number had been assigned. A field inspector would be scheduled. But that wasn't the moment that made it real. That came just before midnight, when I opened my door to grab a package and found a new violation notice tucked beneath the mat. This one wasn't even printed. It was handwritten. Threatening behavior toward HOA leadership, community disruption, pending review. No seal, no signature, just one name scrawled at the bottom in pen. B. Shale. I didn't need a translation. This wasn't a warning. It was a message. And now I had one to send back. The morning after Elijah's visit, I locked the binder copy in my car and drove straight to the county administrative building. Not the sheriff's office, not yet. This first strike needed to be surgical, not explosive. I wanted to trap Beverly in her own maze of policy and overreach before bringing in the full weight of the law. And to do that, I needed alignment with the state-level inspector they assigned to my case. The Department of Business and Professional Regulation wasn't flashy, just a low-rise building with grayed-out windows and a security desk that barely looked up. But inside, they moved fast once I showed the case file. I met with a compliance officer named Rhodes mid-40 seconds, calm, with the expression of someone who'd seen worse but still wasn't numb to it. He flipped through the pages, pausing at the forged logs, then again at the photos from Elijah. "Did she know you were gathering all this?" he asked. "She does now," I said. "She's gonna panic, expect retaliation, possible attempts to discredit you at the next HOA meeting. I've already got a copy of her drafted motion. It's in the folder." Rhodes whistled under his breath. "That's enough to trigger a board audit, minimum." He made a few notes, then slid a business card across the table. "Here's your case number. And my direct extension. We're assigning an enforcement officer to attend the next HOA meeting. You won't be told which one he or she will show up as a resident observer." "Undercover?" He nodded. "Standard protocol when we suspect abuse of access authority, especially when a minor is involved." We finalized the intake, and I left feeling like the first gate had opened. Not all the way, but enough. The storm was building. Back at home, I didn't tell Aiden about the details, just that help was coming, and that he'd be safe. He didn't ask for more. He'd seen enough in Beverly's eyes to know this wasn't just about locks and keys. By noon, I was at work, laying out the rest of the strategy. First, I reached out to 4 neighbors who'd already expressed concern: Carla, Sam, George, and Nora. A quiet woman on the east end of the loop whose toddler had been startled by a supposed patio compliance check the week before. I brought them together at Sam's garage. His was the only property with full audio insulation. I showed them everything: the binder pages, the logs, the photos, and the draft motion Beverly was preparing to push through. That would let her walk through our houses, Carla said, her voice shaking. Legally. She's already doing it, I reminded them. This just makes it policy. George leaned forward. So, what do we do? You vote, I said. You show up. You speak. You sign the statement I'm drafting. What statement? Nora asked. I pulled it from my folder. A simple 1-page declaration addressed to the HOA and the county. It stated that we, as homeowners, did not consent to unscheduled entries or unauthorized compliance visits. That we were aware of recent policy manipulation and would pursue civil action if necessary. All 4 signed. I left with 4 signatures. I needed 7 for a quorum challenge. 10 to trigger a board-wide vote of no confidence. I would get them. That night, I finished drafting a formal motion to present at the next meeting, countering Beverly's proposal with language that prohibited entry without explicit consent and made master key usage a board-reviewed event. I knew she'd try to block it procedurally, but with a compliance officer secretly attending, she wouldn't know which face in the crowd had the power to end her tenure. That was the advantage. She still thought she controlled the room. I printed 30 copies, hand-delivered 10, and just before midnight, I stapled a laminated version to the bulletin board outside the clubhouse, right beside the agenda for next Thursday's meeting. Let her see it. Let her burn. Because the next move wouldn't come from me. It would come from someone sitting quietly in the back row. The next 4 days passed with a strange calm, too calm. The kind you only get before a controlled demolition, when everyone pretends the building isn't about to drop. But underneath it, I could feel the tension folding in. Beverly went quiet. No new finds. No early morning walks, no clipboard sightings. And that silence wasn't surrender, it was repositioning. She knew something was coming, and like any control addict, she was trying to find a new angle. So was I. With the state now officially watching and neighbors starting to mobilize, it was time to shift from documentation to positioning. The trap had already been set. Now, I needed to make sure every step she took was overlaid with consequence. That meant prepping the room. I visited the community center the day before the board meeting. Used the public reservation clause to host a homeowner safety workshop under my professional license. Fire codes, lock standards, and a brief on homeowner rights. Free attendance, no RSVP required. I posted it on the bulletin board and the community Facebook page. Non-confrontational, totally legal. I expected 5 or 6 people. 14 showed up. They came with folded arms and cautious expressions. Most had been on the fence about Beverly for years, frustrated, but unwilling to risk making noise. But now, the footage was circulating. The binder excerpts were circulating. Whispers had hardened into accounts. She walked into my yard and took pictures of my utility box, one man said. She knocked at 7 a.m., said she was doing a compliance pulse check. I didn't even know what that meant. She told me my daughter's pink curtains were out of visual alignment. No one laughed. Not even a nervous chuckle. Just head shakes and the kind of grim silence that only comes from shared invasion. I gave them more than a presentation. I gave them a folder, a simplified version of the evidence packet, redacted names, clean layouts, state regulation highlights, and a sample complaint form, all with a cover page that read, "You have the right to be safe in your own home." It wasn't just information, it was armor. By the end, 7 more neighbors had signed the motion of no confidence. That made 11 total. Quorum cleared. Vote trigger activated. The board didn't know yet. Beverly definitely didn't know. But the stage had shifted. Back at home, I rechecked every entry in the override log. No new unauthorized pings since I'd filed the report. That was the other silence. The kind that comes after a predator has been spotted and is waiting for dusk to fall before it moves again. I set up 3 discrete recording devices in the meeting room, 2 audio, 1 camouflaged motion recorder on the community clock, legal under state open board laws, and redundant against sabotage. Then I reached out to Rhodes at the department. "Will your person be there?" I asked. "They already are," he replied. "Has been for a few weeks." blending in. Keep doing what you're doing. Just know your next move matters more than hers now. It was a good kind of pressure, the kind that tightens your spine instead of your throat. I spent the night before the meeting preparing Aiden's things, emergency contact sheet, alternate keys, the number of a neighbor I trusted. He didn't ask what was going to happen. He just watched me, then quietly asked if I wanted him to stay somewhere else. No, I said. I want you here when it's over. Not during, just after. He nodded. The last thing I did before sleeping was print my speaking notes. Not many, just bullet points. The rest would come from the room, from the eyes watching, from the silence I planned to break. Thursday would mark the end of the calm, the kind of end that starts with a slow exhale, then fire. The boardroom looked no different from any other meeting. Folded chairs. Long plastic table with laminated nameplates. That smell of recycled air mixed with industrial carpet glue. But everything about tonight felt different. The rows filled early. Too early. By 6:45 p.m., every seat was taken. The overflow stood near the back wall, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Some held manila folders, others clutched printed bylaws like shields. And somewhere among them was the state inspector, blending in, watching. Beverly sat at the head of the table, freshly permed, lips pressed into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her blazer was navy blue, patriotic, a visual of manufactured authority. To her right sat Marcia, scanning the crowd with barely concealed anxiety. Dana scribbled notes she'd never read. 2 new board members, a husband and wife, Beverly had recruited 6 months back, looked like they'd swallowed their tongues. I stayed in the back until the meeting officially opened. I wanted her to see everyone else first. Hear the whispers, feel the shift. When I finally stepped forward, Beverly's gaze flicked up, briefly, then back to the agenda in her hand. We'll now begin with the first order of business, she said, tapping her pen against her folder. A motion to authorize internal compliance walkthroughs for households marked as needing safety verification. She didn't even try to soften it. No euphemisms, no careful framing. Just a cold blade dropped onto the table. But the room didn't blink. I raised my hand. I have a counter motion. A murmur moved across the chairs like a low wind. Beverly didn't look up. Motions must be submitted in writing and with 3 business days' notice. The board, it was submitted, I said. 10 physical copies were hand-delivered and logged with the office Dropbox, posted on the bulletin board as required. 24 hours in advance, per section 5.3 of our bylaws. Dana looked panicked, flipping through a stack. Marcia looked ill. Beverly hesitated. For the first time all evening, the certainty cracked. You'll have 5 minutes, she snapped. I only need 2. I stepped forward, notes in hand, and addressed the room. The motion I'm proposing is simple. No HOA member, board member, or associated agent shall enter a resident's home, garage, or private property without written notice, confirmed consent, and the presence of a verified witness. Emergency exceptions must involve documented contact with county first responders. Silence. I turned slightly, letting the rest of the room see my profile, see that I wasn't afraid to be seen making this stand. This isn't about aesthetics, it's about safety. A community where your child is alone and someone with a key can walk in without cause is not a safe community. And tonight, I'm asking this board to remember who they serve us, the homeowners. Not the agenda of one woman with a clipboard and a God complex. Gasps. A few claps. One man stood. Beverly slammed her folder shut. Mr. Talbot, you're out of order. No, Elijah said from the second row. He's not. Every head turned. Beverly's jaw clenched. You will remain silent unless I'm the vice president of this board, Elijah said, rising fully now, and I formally second the motion, which, by our rules, makes it eligible for vote. Someone near the back said, let's do it now. Dana looked helpless. We need to review. You've had the packet, I said. 10 copies, remember? Elijah stepped forward. And for the record, I'd also like to present evidence of unlogged master key usage by the current board president, including falsified logs and unauthorized surveillance behavior. He handed a sealed envelope to Dana. To be included in tonight's record. The room went still. No one breathed. Beverly stood, trying to regain control. This meeting is adjourned. No, I said calmly. It's not. From the back of the room, a man in a plain beige shirt stood. He held up a leather badge. Jason Rhodes, State compliance enforcement. This meeting will proceed, and all motions will be entered into public record under active investigation. Beverly didn't sit back down. She just stared at him like the room had swallowed her whole. Beverly's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The state badge glinted in the fluorescence, and just like that, her authority collapsed. The air in the room changed tense before, but now electric. Even the staunchest fence-sitters on the board stiffened, eyes darting between Beverly and the man she hadn't expected. Jason Rhodes stepped forward, calm, intentional. A plain man in a plain shirt, but in this moment, he held every ounce of power Beverly thought she owned. Per Florida Statute 720.305 and 720.303, he said, voice clear. This meeting is now under observation as part of an active investigation into HOA misconduct and procedural violations. He gestured toward the envelope Elijah had delivered. Board, I've reviewed preliminary evidence. That includes unlogged use of master access keys, falsified violation notices, and motions designed to bypass homeowner consent. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Beverly tried to regain footing. This is a community matter, not a state one. We've always handled these issues internally. That ends tonight, Rhodes interrupted, polite but firm. You are not above state regulation. This isn't about decor standards or aesthetic enforcement. It's about safety. It's about law. Marcia looked like she might cry. Dana leaned into her seat like she wanted to disappear into it. The two newer board members exchanged frantic glances, but no one moved to defend her. Rhodes turned to me. Mr. Talbot, is your motion still active? It island. Do you have quorum signatures? I reached into my file and handed him the full list, 12 signatures, each one a homeowner with documented complaints or evidence. He nodded and passed it to Dana. This is now a matter of official board business, Rhodes announced. The homeowners will vote. A printed ballot was passed around. People checked boxes quietly, pens trembling slightly in some hands. It wasn't just fear of Beverly, it was the fear of change, of realizing they'd lived under the thumb of someone who abused the position they'd entrusted. One by one, the papers returned to the front. Rhodes and Elijah counted. I didn't. I already knew. It wasn't even close. Rhodes read the results aloud. Motion to restrict all master key usage to emergency-only scenarios, with prior consent or law enforcement accompaniment passed, 28-1. All eyes landed on Beverly. She didn't move. Elijah stood. I'd also like to file a second motion, immediate suspension of President Beverly Shale, pending further review by state compliance and internal board counsel. That one didn't even need a vote. The crowd answered with a thunder of voices. Yes, agreed, seconded, about time. Rhodes raised a hand to still them, then he turned to Beverly. Ma'am, I need to inform you that, due to the evidence presented, including altered records and unauthorized entries, you are now formally under investigation. You will refrain from using any HOA-issued keys, equipment, or access points. If you violate that, the sheriff will get involved. Beverly's voice finally broke free. You can't do this to me. I've served this community for 8 years. You've used it, Elijah said flatly. Not served. Beverly backed away from the table, clutching her binder to her chest like a life raft. But the damage was done. The crowd parted for her, silent as she walked out. Some turned their heads. A few couldn't look away. Rhodes addressed the room. We will continue to monitor this board closely. Any further violations will result in direct state enforcement. He paused, then nodded toward me. Mr. Talbot, thank you for your cooperation. I didn't answer. I just looked toward the hallway, where Beverly's footsteps had vanished into the tile. Behind me, the fire inspector's instincts quieted. The father's heartbeat returned to pace. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to safe. The porch was quiet again. No violation notices. No clipboard shadows pacing past the hedges. Just wind, cicadas, and the low hum of life returning to normal. Aiden stood beside me that evening, barefoot on the brick step, staring up at the brass fireman's plaque like he always did when he didn't know what to say. The sunset hit it just right, glinting off the edge like it used to when Dad was alive. It's really over? He asked. Almost, I said. There'll be paperwork, hearings maybe, but her control's broken. She can't touch this house again. He exhaled through his nose. Good. He didn't say more, and he didn't need to. Earlier that day, A new notice went up on the community board. Not a fine, not a warning, a vote announcement. Interim board president election, open to community nominations. Elijah was stepping down too, leaving space for new leadership to take root. 2 neighbors had already asked me if I'd run. I said I'd think about it. Not because I wanted power, but because I finally understood what it cost to not have someone watching the watchers. Inside, I opened the safe and took out the binder copy. I didn't burn it, didn't shred it. I kept it sealed, time-stamped, and cataloged. Because some wars don't end with surrender, they end with memory. I made one last call to Rhodes. He confirmed Beverly had been officially removed from all HOA roles pending the outcome of the investigation. If charges were filed, she'd lose access to any association in the county for 5 years minimum. Accountability, not revenge, just the weight of her own actions folding in on her. That night, Aiden and I reinstalled the original smart lock together. I let him punch in the code. He didn't smile, exactly, but there was pride in the way his fingers didn't shake this time. When we finished, I took the leftover screws and placed them in a small wooden box right beneath the plaque. One final token. A reminder of where this all started. We didn't need to talk about Beverly anymore. Not tonight. We just needed to sit, on the porch, on our own terms, in a house that was ours again. And in that quiet moment, I realized something I hadn't let myself feel since that day she stepped inside. Peace. Real peace. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.